So we will start off with the Treasurer's report delivered by our party treasurer. He was formerly East Mids regional organiser, and he's doing great work ensuring our party is transparent and ticking over nicely. Give a warm welcome to our first speaker, Daniel Gale, everybody.
Thank you, Matt, for that introduction. So I've seen a lot of people here today that I recognise and people that I know personally, but there's also a lot of people here that I've not met before, and people who might not know exactly who I am. So I'm going to start by just introducing myself and give you a little bit of background. So you've already heard my name from Matt there, and you know that I'm the treasurer. But I want to give you some additional background so you really understand who it is that you're trusting with your money. So I took over the treasurer role in January this year, but I have been involved in the party since we started in 2023. By then I was already an activist in nationalism for 4 years. I was spending my weekends leafleting, socialising at networking events and that sort of thing. And occasionally going for hikes or camping with nationalists, as was the thing back then. And this was before there was any real political vehicle for nationalism. But I was involved because I had set out to find the people who were ready to build that vehicle. And by 2023, I had found those people and we started the Homeland Party. And when I started, I was involved in the administration of my region. And as a lot of you here today will be activists or branch organisers, so that's the role that I was at when we started this party. And to be honest with you, I was perfectly happy leafleting and doing that sort of thing, just on the street activism, going to the occasional protest. But I was asked to do more, so I did. So as Matt said, eventually I was asked to take on the RO role for the East Midlands. And at the time, it was a somewhat daunting task, but I accepted it because it was what was asked of me at the time. 6 months later, and the party needed a new treasurer. So I was asked, and I answered. The truth is that I got involved as an activist for one reason, because I knew that there was a problem, and I believed that there was a solution. But I didn't see anybody building that solution. Eventually, I realized that the reason nobody was building it was because everybody, like me, was waiting for someone else to build it. So my experience in nationalism, though it's not as long as other people in this room, is quite varied. I've spent countless Saturdays leafleting, canvassing, holding banners over motorways and attending protests big and small, and I still try and do that when I get the time. I've had roles in media, admin, and organising. But at their core, all of these roles are the same. We're all activists, and we're all working to build the solution that our people need. So now that you know a little bit more about me and my background, we can move on to some of the numbers. Later on, I'm going to talk about the constraints of the existing reporting regime and how I intend to improve it. But for now, I'm going to go through last year's accounts and tell you how I expect them to be different this year. But before we start with that, I just want to define some terms. So the Homeland Party is a membership organisation, meaning we're mutually owned by all of our members. So while officers hold some roles within the party and special responsibilities, every member has the same voting rights. We're incorporated as a company guaranteed by limited by guarantee, not shares. So that means that we don't have any shareholders and nobody can be paid any dividend on any shares. And we're also a non-profit organisation. It's really important, though, that people understand what that means. It doesn't mean that the party can't generate a profit for itself. What it means is that profit that's generated by the membership organisation has to be retained by that organisation and used towards our common goals. So profit ultimately just being the difference between income and expenses, essentially. We have rules in our Articles of Association which prevent anyone from taking out of that profit and actually mean that I'm legally obliged to prevent that. Ultimately, that means that all of the money that you guys put into the party goes towards our shared goals and aims as defined by the Constitution. And quickly, just a brief note on taxation. All organizations like ours are subject to corporation tax, but our 2024 corporation tax bill is 0. This is because we only pay corporation tax on profits derived from trade. So things like membership fees, donations don't count. It's just merchandise sales, that sort of thing. That's what generates a corporation tax bill. And this last year, our trade actually made a loss. So there was no tax on that. And we can carry that loss forward for future years when we do eventually make a profit off of trade. So there could be a small corporation tax in future years. So here are our end of year accounts for 2024. This is the income and expenditure account from that. And you can get this on the Electoral Commission's website. All political parties' accounts are published on the Electoral Commission's website. So starting with our income, you can see that last year we raised £24,000 in membership fees and £31,000 in donations. And you can also see there the ticket sales and merchandise sales, which are the trading income that I just mentioned. So we get about 40% of our income from memberships last year and 52% from donations. So in terms of 2025, I can already tell you that we have raised more in both membership fees and donations. And I still expect donations to be our single largest income stream. The distinction between membership fees and donations is really important because the money is assigned in different ways. So membership fees generally cover the day-to-day running of the party, whereas donations are used to support activism and regional activity. So donations, that's the funding that really drives us forward and helps us to succeed, whereas membership fees provide a stable income for the day-to-day expenses that we need to support that activity. And ticket sales obviously include things like this, conference sales and Christmas events and that sort of thing. The trading sale and the bank cash back there as well, they're just small supplementary income streams that can be assigned more or less freely. You'll notice if you can read that in note 1, it says that none of our donations were reportable. So this means that we didn't receive any donations that exceed the £11,000 threshold to be reported to the Electoral Commission. I expect that to be the same this year because we tend not to get very, very large donations over that sort of level. On that topic, for your interest, our average donation for 2024 was £56.37, and our average donation so far this year has been £45.51. If you don't include Oak subscriptions in that figure, that goes up to £64.36 and £82.04 respectively. So, remembering that this report covers 2024, we're going to take a look at the expenses now. 2024 was our first full year in existence, and we only registered at the end of January that year, so we only had 11 full months of being a registered party. So in 2024, we spent £8,000 on office costs. These are the costs associated with like day-to-day running of the party, things like stationery, postage, printer ink, that sort of thing. You'll see the single biggest category there is events costs. So for the full 12 months of 2024, that's what we spent on events. That includes all of the costs associated with putting on events like venue hire, travel costs for guest speakers, and that sort of thing. So conferences can be quite expensive. It's another thing that we always make a loss on. One of the reasons it can be so expensive is because when we have foreign guests, we actually pay for their travel and accommodation and subsistence, because that's really the done thing. And on that topic, it's worth mentioning that we were asked this year and last year to speak at multiple conferences around Europe. The normal thing here is that the organization holding the conference pays for the travel costs and accommodation of guest speakers. So while we would have had to have done that for Worksworth and the conference earlier this year, the Remigration Conference, that really is an investment, because we then get a return on that when our guys are paid for to go to conferences like the Remigration Summit in Milan and things like that, which help us build connections with parties like the AFD and other groups with elected representatives, and who can put us in touch with people who can help us in other ways. And so when we have foreign speakers come in, it's not just the interest of having those speakers here, but there's actually a return on that investment as we build our network and expand that way. So you get a little bit of compound interest on that when our guys then go to, say, Milan with the Remigration Summit and further build that network with new people. So next, we spent £9,500 on campaigning, which is our second largest expense. Now, I want you to remember that number, £9,500 on campaigning, because that will become relevant later on. This category includes all of our campaign activity, so everything local and regional as well as national. In this number, you'll find things like the Roger Robertson campaign, and that was our first ever election campaign, and as well as the local stuff that a lot of you guys will do that's outside of an election but still a local campaign. And then lastly there, you've just got the banking and payment processing compliance fees, which are relatively small expenses that are self-explanatory and just keep the party running. So our retained earnings for last year, and this is the party's profit, that was £25,513.34. All of that money stays in the party, as I explained earlier. Now that is quite a big number, but relative to political parties, it's very, very small. And the majority of our money that comes in does actually get spent. The only area where we've retained significant levels of income has been in the Oak, and this has been intentional because we've been building a reserve for paying wages. And for those who don't know, the Oak is our fundraising campaign to allow us to employ full-time staff. I'm very happy to announce, if you're an Oak subscriber, you'll already know this, but I'm happy to announce to those who don't know that we have actually this year reached our first goal. And from January next year, we will be able to employ our first member of staff. So this year, we'll see all of our Oak contributions retained in that reserve once again. But from 2026, that money will start getting spent as staff costs. Next, this is the asset and loan statement and the balance sheet. These really just tell you about what the party currently holds at the date, which is 31st of December 24, because that's when our financial year ends. Most of this is cash in the bank, but it also includes things like assets like cameras and that sort of thing. I'm not going to go into detail here just for brevity, but if you have questions on that, find me afterwards and let me know. So that's what's happened last year and how I expect it to change for this year. But more importantly, we really need to talk about what I can do to improve the Treasury Department and improve how we inform and communicate with members of the party. So when I took on the role in January, one of the first things I recognized was that the commitment to transparency, while it was genuinely held by everyone involved, it didn't really go far enough. The end of year accounts are published on the Electoral Commission's website, but there was never any commitment from the Treasurer to communicate that report to members. And I was responsible for finalising that report, but didn't have the opportunity to change the reporting regime for 2024. And the Treasurer's report in September, the speech I'm doing now, is not very well defined. And providing a report on an ongoing financial year can be difficult without the proper team and processes in place. These processes were not in place when I took the role, but they will be for future reporting. So from this year, I'm going to commit to sending the end of year financial report to members by email when it's complete. This will be a comprehensive report which explains the accounts in terms that a normal person can understand. So you don't need to be an accountant to read it. I don't know if anyone's ever been on the Electoral Commission's website and looked at the party accounts for some other parties. I'd recommend you do it because some of them are not as clear as they could be. And I won't speculate on the reasoning for that. So this will include as well, this report will include more detail on particular categories. So rather than just telling you, oh, we spent this much money on campaigning, we'll also tell you exactly how that money was spent. So what did we spend that money on to support the campaigns? Eventually, this report will develop in time to include a report on our electoral activities more generally. That development depends heavily on the development of an elections team. So that's how I'll change that particular reporting part of the reporting regime. But I also intend to support branches and regions set up regular branch and regional meetings. So from next year, I will commit to attending at least one meeting in every region, providing regions are holding them regularly. This will act as an opportunity for me to connect with our members and help me understand the needs of every branch and region. This will give members 3 opportunities to be informed and ask me questions, and it helps us more properly define the purpose of the Treasurer's report. So on the topic of regional funding, I know that members, activists and organisers all want to know that the money that they bring into the party supports their activity. And this will be particularly important when we do start holding the branch and regional meetings where people might be wanting to make contributions to particular things that happen in their region that they discuss with me. So to that end, I will institute before next year's Treasurer's report a regional ring fencing scheme for donations. This will mean that ROs will have some discretionary spending money, some discretion on spending money raised in their region. But the form and function of this ring fencing will depend heavily on the commitment from regions to raise money. That's because I don't want this system to become a constraint on new and developing branches. It's really important that we're able to freely spend money to establish branches that don't have any income. I'll also make it easier for organisers to actually acquire the equipment that they need. So currently we're working on an organisers ordering system on the website, which will allow organisers to quickly order things like leaflets and banners. And where central party funding constraints exist, organisers will be able to go directly to members with the amount of money they need to raise to buy the item that they want as a region, and they'll be able to directly fundraise with those members so that they can buy that equipment. In the longer term, I'd like for these changes to lead to regional accounting units, but this will not happen until we meet the legal and constitutional obligations that we need for that. And if you have questions about that, come and ask me. So that's the future for us internally, but what about externally? Well, there is obviously a real appetite for change in the public. Only in the last few months, we've seen the rise of, the Raise the Colours campaign, as well as organic local protests against migration. Unfortunately, some people are fooled into thinking that this energy is an end to itself. But that thinking is wrong. Men and women across the country have always had this energy, but the system has been able to repress and misdirect it. And now that their pressure valves are operating at maximum capacity, they are running out of options. But they do have one hope, and that is that we remain disorganized. Smarter people than I have lectured on this topic many times, and it is beyond the scope of this speech. But the facts are clear. We need an organization, an institution that directs energy into something effective. We can be that institution, but only if we build it together. And this brings me to my final point. What does the party need from you? We've talked about what I'm going to do to improve the Treasury Department, and how I'm going to communicate more effectively with members. But let's talk about how you can help build the party. So it's quite simple, really, because the party needs three main things. Okay, it needs leaders, it needs funding, and most importantly, it needs patience. So we'll start with the leaders. Everyone in this room and everyone in our party has it in them to be a leader. And if you think you're an exception, then you're wrong. You're here today because you know that there is a problem and you believe that there is a solution. And only by everyone accepting the challenge of leadership can we succeed in building that solution. Great leaders are often people who didn't initially see themselves as leaders, but only became one because they were asked. Well, if you're waiting to be asked, here I am asking you today to get more involved. Speak to your RO or any one of the department heads, find a place you fit in, and lead. Wherever your place is in the party, your work is vital, and you can be a leader. The more people we have working every week, the more efficient we become, and the more we can do with the resources that we have. As an example, I will only be able to achieve the commitments I've made to you today if I have a competent team around me to help with the associated administrative and fundraising tasks. Speaking of which, all of this work does require funding. Our enemies are well funded. And while it might sometimes seem as though the funding gap is insurmountable, we don't actually need to match their levels of funding in the short term. Look at what we've done with what we have now compared to well-funded establishment shill organisations like Stand Up to Racism and Antifa. They have multiple paid employees, state funding, direct support from the political class, and yet they are outnumbered and out-organised by us on a regular basis. They've never once succeeded in shutting down a Homeland Party event. We can even look at supposed nationalist organisations which bring in more money than us but achieve next to nothing. I'm not going to name any names, but here's an excerpt from the 2024 end-of-year accounts for a political party with household name recognition. You might notice something's missing. Their campaign expenditure is empty. Not a penny spent on campaigning. They did manage to spend £128,000 on management costs. And this is a party that raises £271,000 a year. Where does all that money go? Well, we know where our money goes. Remember that £9,500 in campaign expenditure that we spent? Well, here's an example of the kind of thing a party can spend money on between elections. This gained us quite a bit of attention online, but it also had a real-world effect. So an ex-page called UK Aesthetics posted about this graffiti on Ilkley Moor, and we sent a team to clean it up. We bought a pressure washer, some ecologically friendly cleaner, and some other bits and pieces. And together we spent a grand total of £751. That includes a pressure washer that will be used for future campaigns and other things as well. And you're telling me that a political party which received £271,000 in donations can't achieve more than a megaphone at someone else's protest. We're lucky enough to have a staunch, dedicated core of activists who put their time and money into the party. And if you're already donating everything you can, then I sincerely thank you. And I hope that my presentation today gives you the confidence you need to continue contributing. But if you're not sure, if you're thinking about joining the party, or if you've just joined the party and you're thinking about whether you should donate, I ask you to really think deeply about how you can contribute and talk to me if you have concerns or questions. Even small donations can help, and that's not just a cliche line, it is actually true. So as I mentioned, I was the RO for the East Midlands, and when I was the RO, I think this is still the case, when we went leafleting, we set a 250 leaflets per person target. Every session, every time we went leafleting. And we were often in groups of around 4 people. So if 4 people reach that target, that's 1,000 leaflets delivered on one Saturday. That batch of 1,000 leaflets costs us roughly £30. So each leafleter, roughly speaking, costs £7.50. So if just 4 of you here today commit to donating £7.50 a month, you will fund 1,000 leaflets going through Letterbox every month. So you can see how our little but often grassroots funding can work very well if we pull together. And this is how we've achieved everything that we have achieved so far. But ultimately, we will need to find funding from larger donors. There are political allies who share our views, who are willing to fund us, but they will not do it overnight. They have to see that we have the staying power and the resilience to make their money work for nationalism. And you can't blame them, given the shambles that nationalism has been before us. The fact is that we need patience. And it's vital that we take the long view. We cannot be myopic. There is no smooth road to victory. And this is not just politics, this is a fundamental fact of life. Difficult times do lie ahead for our people, and difficult times for our party. And in difficult times, we have a choice. We can do what is right, or we can do what is easy. Rarely does the opportunity come to do both. It is a struggle. But nothing worth having comes easy, and there is nothing more worth having than your nation and your people. Remember that in this struggle, we must remain focused. It's easy to be distracted by non-solutions offered by people with no clear direction. They will tell you what you want to hear so that they can get your money off of you. But ultimately, this is a waste of your time and your resources. They will not offer anything long-term. These people are con artists. They are selling the political equivalent of get-rich-quick schemes. All you have to do is donate to their so-called pressure group, post something edgy online, or pay for their next holiday, and they assure you that the Overton window will be shifted so far that real nationalist action will be unnecessary. They are selling you a revolution from your bedroom. It's very convenient, but the truth is that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Only the Homeland Party has a clear direction and defined strategy. Charlatans will offer you the easy way out, but we must not be fooled into thinking that there's a quick solution. We have to stay the course, even when it gets difficult, because hard work is what affects change in this world. Our enemies want us to take the easy path. In fact, they put them there for us. Countless times we've seen pressure valves save the establishment from real nationalism. We must break that cycle. And only the Homeland Party can do that. But we can only do that with your support. If you want to see something truly different, something built that can actually affect change for our people in the real world, only one option exists. Join the Homeland Party. Support us with donations to fund our activity. Thank you.